Welcome to the Flying Dutchman podcast show. Today we have a very special guest, Yogi. Yogi has flown many helicopters, I believe 7 or 8 different airframes. He's flown in the Army, the Navy, he was a Marine, he's flown in the Air Force. And he's here on the show to talk about his life story, where he's from, what he's done, what he's doing. Very admirable missions that this man flies and has flown. So I had a little bit of audio in the beginning, little audio issues, but I think it's corrected. And we're going to jump right into it. Yogi is a very fast-paced interviewee. A lot of times I just sat back and listened to him. I could listen to him all day. So, Yogi, who are you? And tell us your story.
Honestly, I'm one of these guys. I always wanted to fly as far back as I can remember. I mean, there's pictures of me at 4 or 5 years old holding airplanes. So I don't have a specific time when the bug hit me. I am literally one of those cliche guys who it was always something I wanted to do. I grew up in New York City, single working mom. Public school, again, like you mentioned earlier, a little distracted is a good word for things as a teenager. But I always sort of straddled the line because I knew I wanted to be a military pilot. I kind of knew there were some lines I couldn't cross, even though I probably crossed them and just got lucky. But as I was growing up and researching the things I wanted to do, I wanted to be a Marine as well. And so, I kind of, focused on being a Marine aviator. And when I first walked into the officer recruiting office, which is a separate office from a regular recruiting office, the guy threw me out. Yeah, he's like, there's an image of a guy who's going to be an officer and you're not it. I was a little bit of a street guy, and I think I might have walked in a wife beater. I mean, and so he basically was, he threw me out and he said, I'm not even gonna start the process to bring you into this program. The Marine Officer Program, specifically a program called the Platoon Leaders Class. And he said, but if you're really serious about it, he goes, there's 2 options I'll offer you. He goes, you can enlist in the Marine Reserves, because I was already in college by then. And you can go in the reserves and then, try to get in the program later. He goes, I recommend that because I think you need that. Or come back in a year and know how to present yourself. That's all he said. He didn't say, he just said, know how to present yourself and make the right impression. And he goes, it's up to you to figure out what that is if you're serious about being a Marine officer. I was pretty crestfallen at that point. I thought it was, the end of all the things I dreamed about. But like a lot of things, when you think something's really bad, it turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you, because it forced me to learn how to act, learn how to dress, learn how to present myself, work on presenting myself better vocabulary wise, diction wise. I was able to talk to friends of my mom's, met guys she dated. She dated a guy who'd been a Marine aviator, and he basically taught me some things, some of the business people she knew, things like that, about making a good impression, shaking hands, looking people in the eye. I read all the books, and this before the internet, how to make friends and influence people, how to make a good first impression. So, the next year I showed up in a, blue Oxford shirt, khakis and desert boots. And I was accepted into the program. And long story short, I went to Marine Officer Candidate School, graduated. Was all Marine officers go to what's called TBS, the basic school, which is a 6-month course, basically an infantry small unit tactics type course, and also the administrivia of being a Marine officer. and things like that. And just about the time we were going to graduate, they told us, they brought us in a room, and I'm paraphrasing, but they basically were like, kind of sucks to be you guys. Um, we got too many pilots in the Marine Corps, and we're gonna have to basically delay you guys going to flight school by about 2 years. Um, so you know, they gave us a couple options. They said you could drop your air contract because you were contracted to be a pilot if you successfully completed OCS and TBS and passed the physical and all the written tests, which I had done. If you dropped your air contract, they would give you any job in the Marine Corps you wanted. And then the rest of us who wanted to still pursue aviation, they were going to stick us where they needed us for 18 to 24 months. And then, provided our physicals were still good and all that, we would get to flight school. Well, one of the lieutenants in my class, his dad was a Navy admiral who worked at NAVAIR, which is the headquarters for naval aviation. And as you know, naval aviation, Marine Corps aviation, Coast Guard aviation all falls under the umbrella of naval aviation. So he walked over to his Marine counterpart, was like, "Hey, what's going on?" The guy said, "Yeah, we got too many pilots." And this admiral goes, "Well, we're kind of short pilots. Do you think some of these guys would want to switch over to the Navy and be Navy pilots? I mean, we're all naval aviators." And so they offered that option to us. A bunch of us took it. So after a few months of paperwork and waiting around and all that, I had already graduated TBS, so there's nothing else I was going to do in the Marine Corps other than go to flight school. About 130 of us literally were handed our DD 214s from the Marine Corps, sidestepped over, sworn as ensigns, and went down to flight school. Making a little too much noise, buddy. Um, and that was it. I went to flight school, year and a half at Pensacola, the usual. I selected helicopters. I was always fascinated with helicopters because I grew up in the midst, in the midst of the 60s, early 70s. So it was on TV. Hueys were on TV all the time. My cousin was a door gunner. Uh, my uncle's kid, who was a lot older than I was a door gunner in Vietnam. He came back with all these cool stories. So I was always fascinated with helicopters. And I even took a lesson in college on my own.
Oh,
And the guy crashed. He showed me an auto rotation and we crashed. But ignorance is bliss. And I thought it was cool that you could crash and walk away and it was no big deal. So I was like, I definitely want to be a helicopter pilot. And long story short, I selected helicopters, got my wings in the Navy, flew CH53Es in the Navy in the Philippines. I was in the Philippines for 3 years, then came back and finished up my Navy time at Norfolk in Virginia. Met my wife at had my daughter, and had another my wife had a daughter from a previous marriage that I adopted. So I had my two daughters, and we went uh, I decided after my second daughter was born that I thought maybe I wanted to get out of the military, not do the deployments and things. So in 91, I got out, came back to New York and started working. And right away realized I'd made a big mistake. I actually tried to get back in the Navy and they were like, "Nah, you're out. We're drawn down. See ya." And I worked in the corporate world for a while, worked for Airborne Express in their management program. Didn't work out very well.
mhm.
Luckily, a buddy of mine worked in the theater business and got me a gig working in the box office on Broadway, which was actually a really good gig. And I started flying in the Army Guard.
How
And
did how did you manage to gravitate to the Army Guard?
I just, a lot of aviators, when they get off active duty, still want to fly in the Guard and Reserve. So I just shotgunned all my paperwork it was a Navy Reserve unit in Norfolk where I'd been. There was a Marine Reserve unit in Norfolk where I'd been. There was Army Guard all around New York, Air Guard,
Mm.
and I just shotgunned all my paperwork, and the Air Guard, the Army Guard came back to me first. So I became a warrant officer in the New York Army National Guard, flew Hueys for about six-ish years. It was a lot of fun. Most of the guys in my unit were cops and firemen. So it was we had a lot of fun, great stories, good guys.
Oh,
And
nice.
I was still working in the theater business, started going to some acting classes, but still missed doing it full time, and I thought maybe I was never going to have the opportunity to do that again. So I was just going to have to accept the fact that I was going to fly in the Guard and Reserves the rest of my life. Then the opportunity to go in the Air Guard, flying combat search and rescue. There's a unit out on Long Island. They had an opening, and I applied and was accepted shockingly because it was pretty competitive.
Nighthawks?
uh, Pave Hawks,
Pave Hawks?
HH60 Pave Hawks. Yeah. So I got in that unit, was in that unit for about 2 years. And then I was doing some active duty, my 2 weeks. And I found out the Air Force was hurting for helicopter pilots. So I asked if I could come on active duty, came on active duty and ended up staying 13 years till I retired.
Wow.
So I had about 7 years broken service, ended up serving in four branches of the military, flying in three. So it was pretty
That's
cool.
that's very cool. So when you flew, we're gonna go back a little bit. You flew the CH53 Echoes in the Navy.
Yep.
So that wasn't the Minesweeper
No,
squadron.
what we did was called vertical onboard delivery. We were
Oh.
trash haulers basically, and we did a little everything. Like we were
Hmm.
stationed in the Philippines. We did tactical stuff. There when I was there, there was a lot of unrest going on. I mean, there's always stuff going on there.
Yeah.
But it was so we would always fly we get the Marine detachment from the embassy and fly them into the Marine detachment was at QB Point, and
Mhm.
we would fly them into the embassy of Manila so they can reinforce the embassy. Um, because there's Marine barracks at Naval Air Station at Subic Bay, right?
Okay,
And we
yeah.
were at QB Point, so we would fly the Marines in there. We'd work with the Filipinos. Uh, so it was pretty good flying. We did a lot of stuff,
Hmm.
Korea, Japan, a lot of exercises. So it was really cool being that, living in the Philippines and
Yeah.
flying in that part of the world. But yeah, we were strictly trash haulers. I flew a straight Echo, not a minesweeper, which I'm pretty proud of.
Yeah.
Now the Navy got rid of them and they combine, they do both. The minesweeper squadrons do. You're kind of a jack of all trades.
Oh,
Back
really?
then there was the minesweepers and a couple of separate 53 E-dets. Um,
Hmm.
but so now it's a little different. And now with the new K model coming out, I'm really interested to see what the Navy does
The
with
King
that.
Stallion?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a bad boy.
Listen, that was a great aircraft. I loved it. I enjoyed
Uh-huh.
flying it very much. It was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
Uh, just a really impressive capabilities, fast, maneuverable. I'm very proud and happy to be an Echo driver for
I,
sure.
I would think. Do you know how many hours you have in the Echo?
Yeah, about 800, I
Oh,
think.
okay. A lot of over the water flights, huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's definitely some nights out there where you're trying to find a boat. You're looking at your gas and you're like, they're never, there's definitely a couple of nights you're like, they're never gonna find me. I'm just gonna disappear and that'll be it. But yeah, it was great. I love the things I've done, but
Uh-huh.
I'm very glad I started out a naval aviator. I'm a guy who
Yeah.
thinks naval aviators have the edge on everyone else, and I speak with a tiny bit of authority just because I've been blessed to have naval aviator wings, Army aviator wings, and Air Force pilot wings. So
When you had to wear your dress blues or dress gray or whatever, did you have three sets of wings that you
I
wore on
usually
that
would
uniform?
I would usually wear and I probably could have gotten away with three, but in the Air Force I never wore a dress uniform in the Guard ever.
Oh, really?
So,
That
but
sounds like a good unit.
yeah, and then in the Air Force, when I wore my blue uniform, I wore my naval aviator wings. I'm pretty proud of those, and also
Yeah.
because of the rivalries and stuff, a lot of the Air Force guys, and there's a lot of ex-Army pilots in the Air Force, a lot of
Mm.
ex-Navy pilots and Marine pilots in the Air Force, especially on the helo side, because there was a time where the Air Force was not training helicopter pilots at all, so they took a lot of inter-service transfers,
Oh,
right? And then just because of the lifestyle of the Air Force, a lot of guys do exchange tours with the Air Force and decide they want to stay, and do inter-service transfers. So but the Navy wings would piss a lot of guys off. I wore them most of the time just to piss guys off because they'd be like,
the
"Why do you
wings of
wear
gold.
those?" And I'm like, "I earned these, and because of these, you just gave me those. I didn't have to earn it, you know." So,
That's a
so it would aggravate guys, and I took great pleasure in it. It's like yeah, every Marine Corps birthday, I would write on the whiteboard, "Happy birthday, Marine Corps," and guys would be like, "Why don't you go back and do this?" But there was always a bunch of ex-Marines and stuff, so we would just laugh at these guys and be like, "Whatever."
uh,
That parochialism. Some guys take it a little too far, and
they do.
you can have a lot of fun with those guys.
You
You know,
can. And
but
you hit them with some good logic because you gave
yeah,
me your wings because I had these wings.
yeah. I mean, I earned the
How do you get
Navy
around
ones,
that?
and I think you're, you know, I, I think I think the United States military aviator is probably the best or among the best in the world, bar none. But I like the way the Navy did things,
Mhm.
and it allowed me to adapt to the Army and Air Force fairly easy. Um, and I
There.
thought the training was, you know, um, going to Pensacola is a good mix of working hard and being able to enjoy yourself and being in a nice place. And
Mhm.
I've been to Fort Rucker many times. I don't think I'd have liked to go to flight school there. And I don't think I'd enjoyed Air Force flight school either. So, I'm very fortunate the way things panned out. And
Mhm.
yeah, it was fun, but the mission being combat search and rescue, though, I have to say it was the best mission in the DoD. And I'm very blessed and proud to have been a part of that and be part of combat search and rescue, and especially being able to do real work in Iraq and Afghanistan, and and work with some of the bravest, most selfless people I've ever seen. So, I could goof on I'll make fun of the Air Force because I was in the fighting part of the Air Force, but I'm really proud of that. And as much as I love the Marine Corps, and I think the Marine Corps was an amazing experience for me, very transformative. I needed it, very cliche. Like you talked about going to the Army at 17, I needed it at 20, 19 and 20, because I was still pretty selfish and
Mhm.
pretty uh immature, and
Street.
I needed the beatings, the literal beatings that I got.
Mhm.
And it was great. I love being a naval aviator, but as far as being able to do the mission, and because I served in combat in the Air Force, I'm super proud of that. I mean, I have the green feet tattooed on my butt, which is
Hey,
tradition, and that means a lot. That
some of the listeners might not know what the green feet is. Could you
So,
explain that?
it dates back to Vietnam. The pararescue guys started it. When you made a combat rescue, your first rescue in combat, you got green feet tattooed on your butt because the helicopters were called Jolly Greens. So, the they kind of adopted the Jolly Green logo and things like that. So the green feet became a tradition, and then that extended out to all air crew, pilots, gunners, flight engineers, PJs. So
Mhm.
once you make your first rescue in combat, it's tradition to get the green feet tat, and I mean that was a big deal to me, and
It is a big deal.
having earned those green, I feel I earned those green feet, and got to do many things subsequent to that, but you do that first one, you feel like you made your bones, and that means a lot. And I was very, very, very proud to have been part of that community. I think it's one of the best communities in the DoD.
I agree. In fact, the new version of the Pavehawk are called Jolly Greens, and I think
Yeah, no, the call sign's Jolly. It's
yeah,
Jolly or Pedro. Those are the two main call signs you'll
okay.
hear. We use
And
some other
Pedro goes
ones.
back to Vietnam
Yeah,
too.
yeah, we used some other ones, Gecko. We used some different ones in the beginning just because of the ATO before we were able to get back to the traditional stuff, the air task and order, so
Hmm.
we would pick. I flew in Afghanistan with the Gecko call sign, also with the Vampire call sign, but the call sign that we're known by is either Jolly or Pedro. When we were doing we're doing a lot of medevac stuff, and you talk to a lot of Marines, a lot of Brits, a lot of foreign guys down in South, Helmand Province. You say you're
Mm.
a Pedro pilot, you don't got to pay for a drink.
No.
So
What is the
uh,
motto?
that
So
others
others may
may live,
live.
so that others may live. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
these things
selfless.
we do that others may live.
Hmm.
I'm very very proud to have been part of that organization.
Yeah, you should be because that's a very selfless.
No,
Uh,
I've been lucky. I've had I like to call a very interesting but highly undistinguished military career, but it's been fun, and again, I got to really see some amazing people.
yeah, you
You know, I
have.
I look at my military service as a gift. I got everything great in my life out of it. I got to
Uh,
fly. I got my family. I now have four beautiful grandchildren.
oh
I
yeah, I
have,
love that.
I have two daughters that are amazing. My grandkids. One of my daughters lives with me with my grandkids, so I get to see them every day. And
Hmm.
so I'm very blessed. And I got all of that was because all the good things in my life have become because of my time in the military.
That's
Probably the greatest things in my life. So I'm very thankful.
now one thing I want to go back to is you transitioned from the Navy flying CH53 Echoes, and now you're flying UH-1H, I imagine, Hueys with the National Guard. How did you transition? How was that transition made from flying such?
I
Was it
mean,
just?
they send you to the course. There's a course in Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. And just a transition course, intro to the Huey, like any other course, academics, simulator,
Mhm,
flying the actual aircraft, check rides
mhm,
along the way.
mhm.
And I'll say this: when it comes to training helicopter pilots, I don't think anybody does it better than the Army as far as having it down to a science and making it digestible. Uh, the Army started out with that high school of flight school thing, so the academics, when they go over the various systems of the aircraft, when they're teaching you things, it's very, 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 very
Rudimentary.
and I don't want to say rudimentary, but at a level you can understand, and they just do it well, and they put out
Hmm.
a really good product. The,
Hmm.
the the Navy was really cool because they treated you like you'd never seen an airplane before. The Air Force a little, they kind of expect you to be a little more academically ahead of things, and that could make it tough on some people, even me, even as an experienced guy. I struggle with a couple of their training programs, when I was like, hey, can we get a little more basic before we get on to this? But um they all do it well. But the Army, their program at that time was very mature. I think it was 2 months. And
Oh, oh,
it was 2 months, and I was took a check ride and showed up at my unit a Huey co-pilot.
there you are. And being a National Guard unit, I where I grew up nearby, there was a Huey National Guard unit, and every now and then I'm lucky enough to see maybe six of them doing a tail for me, going somewhere. Don't know where they're going, and then hours later, here
I'll
they come
probably get
back.
something. Probably get something to eat. Probably find a
I
good Chinese restaurant somewhere.
why
most
do
of
you
them are
say that?
because it it was a boondoggle. It was great, and there were some amazing pilots, and I learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't do a lot of tactical stuff. We didn't do a lot of tactical stuff. We'd come in, and a typical day you come in, and the lieutenant who's got less flight time, than anybody comes in. Okay, today I want you to go out and do this, do that, the other, and yes, sir. And then he'd leave, and the W3 would come up and go, "We're not doing that. We're flying down to Atlantic City. We'll shoot some approaches, and then we're gonna go eat some Chinese food at this Chinese buffet I know down there."
Oh, I
And
get.
it would be stuff like that. We mostly what we did, we go to West Point during
Oh,
our annual training and
mm-hmm.
do stuff with the cadets in the summer, or we'd go up to Fort Drum and do stuff up there. But it just that was and again, a lot of the guys were either cops, firemen, airline pilots. It was just the guys had all been to Vietnam, right? They don't,
Okay.
most of the older guys had flown in Vietnam. So they didn't take much seriously,
Couldn't.
and they just didn't. And for us, those of us who didn't, we looked up to, to me, these guys were gods. These were guys I watched on TV, and they were these funny cops and firemen who were just having fun and had stories and I'm still good friends with, you know, two or three guys from the guard that,
Well, that's cool.
amazing that, we'll be friends forever. It was just fun. Just a lot of fun, some good flying, getting
Hmm.
to fly an iconic aircraft. That wasn't lost on me. That I was flying an
Okay.
iconic aircraft,
Yeah.
you
Any
know, and
patches on them?
um all of ours had been to Vietnam.
Okay.
Most of them been to Vietnam, a
When you
couple
went,
from Germany and stuff, but you
hmm
could go through them and yeah, they were but yeah, you're flying an iconic aircraft. It's a lot of fun. And I loved it, but the mission of Air Force Combat Search and Rescue was super attractive to me. And I got lucky because that unit had all the guys from the Perfect Storm in it. That crew, I flew with Colonel Ravola, who was the aircraft commander of the aircraft that ditched. He taught me how to air refuel. I flew with his co-pilot. I flew with all those guys uh, from that movie and that book by Sebastian Younger. So, that was amazing as well. When I look back on it, I mean, I've just been real lucky and I've gotten to just run into some really cool characters in the world of aviation.
Yeah, and I did see that movie, The Perfect Storm,
Yeah.
and the 60 had extended themselves to get the job done, but they became fuel starved, if I
Well, they
remember
couldn't
right.
get on the tanker because it was so rough. And years later, I've been there. Now I've been there my turn trying to get in it on a tanker, in Indian country, going, we got to get on this tanker, you know, or things might not go well for us. So it was awesome, and the mission is awesome, and timing is everything. I call myself the king of bad timing because my wild career is because I'd end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But then again, 9/11 in a lot of weird ways was the best thing that ever happened to me from a professional standpoint. It's
Understood.
very personal. My brother survived both World Trade Center bombings. He was there in 93. He was a commodities trader. So he was there in 9/11. And, he's had some issues with it subsequent to that. And, uh, but being a New Yorker and I'd worked in the World Trade Center. I worked for my brother in the summers in between college and OCS and things. Uh, actually took a year off from college, so worked for him. So, I knew that it was all very personal to me. 9/11 obviously is very personal to me. And but for me professionally, you know, I'd only been in the Air Force about 2 years, a little over 2 years by that time, just kind of getting my feet wet as an aircraft commander. And then next thing you know, man, I spent the next, let's see, my first deployment was early 2002, my last 2009. So 7 years, I was basically either going to war, coming back from war, or getting ready to go to war again.
Yeah. I want to
So
know a little bit more about air refueling, and I'll include some video for the audience to look at. But when I look over, what's over your right shoulder is a Pave Hawk,
yeah,
and
this is my
with the
little,
refueling boom,
yeah,
and that refueling boom, it extends out. Is that
yeah, it
correct?
extends out at 10 feet.
Okay. And you've got to plug into a basket.
Yeah, so the tanker extends the hose. There's this sort of aerodynamic basket that sort of operates on a parachute principle, right? It's got these spokes, like these thin spokes that keep it sort of rigid, and then you got to plug it. But you're really not looking at the basket. There's various relationships, visual relationships that you're trying to set up to line things up between the flaps and the strut and this. And if you have that sight picture, you're generally good. Because if you stare at the basket, you'll just miss it because it's moving.
Uh-huh.
So you kind of set that. We used to call it the flap strut relationship. The flap, you want the flap to line up with the refueling pod, and then if the flap lined up with that, then you would generally lined up with the basket, and then you would
Mhm.
move in the plug, and then takes, I forget the numbers now, but X amount of pressure to lock in. These locks in, then the fuel pumps at 1,000 pounds a minute,
Ooh.
and we
What
would
airspeed?
we're at about one between 95 and 105, maybe 110, and maybe 110, and the 130's hanging on the flaps.
Wow. And you're getting heavier.
Yeah, yeah. So you're
So,
pulling a little power, and you got to stay on it. And if you get to the end of the track and it turns, you got to fly to stay on the tanker. Sometimes you'll fall off and have to get back on. But yeah, it's a little bit of work, and it's challenging at night, or if it's really turbulent. It can be awesome and it can be terrifying. It runs literally that gamut. You
in
know,
and
it
out of the clouds at
Yeah,
night.
I mean, yeah, I think everybody's got some horror story where they went in the clouds in the middle of it, and same, because I did it in the 53 too. I mean, I've got yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, it could be this really smooth event, or
Hmm.
it can be horrifying, you know.
Over Indian country.
Right. So, you know, you want to you practice it. It's great. It's an amazing capability that allows you to extend your range and be able to do the job, and get to places where you normally wouldn't be able to because of the normal range of the helicopter. And God I've got I think I've got a rescue. I think it was about 600 miles out to sea. I had to refuel 3 times on the way out, 3 times on the way back. um
From a HC-130,
Yep,
or
from an HC-130
that was
off the
they,
coast of California. Yeah.
oh, you were deployed over on this end of the country, or
I was actually just doing some training. I was TDY
at
to the
Moffett?
California at Moffett, and
Uh-huh.
they're like, "Hey, we got a rescue. Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Sure." And they're like, "Okay, it's this guy was septic. He was on a tanker,
Hmm.
and he was septic. And we went out. The Coast Guard obviously couldn't go out that far, and they asked the Air Guard if they would do it. And we went out and got him and brought him to Stanford University Medical Center.
Nice. And how long did that take, that mission?
I want to say, well, they were steaming towards shore, but so 110 knots, 120 knots, going 120 miles every hour. So I want to say it was about 4.5 hours out there, maybe more if I remember. Then
Uh-huh.
about 4 back. It was a pretty long mission.
And you had to tank 3 times out and three
Yeah,
times
yeah,
back?
because you don't want to, because you never want to be at a critical thing. So you
Okay.
always wanted to have enough to where you could either get back or be able to get on the tank. You didn't want to put yourself in a bad situation. So better safe than sorry. So whenever you could take on fuel, you would.
So would that HC-130 be the same one and he just hung around till you were hungry for fuel, or did he go back and another one relieved him?
I don't remember. I think another one relieved them.
Yeah.
I think another one relieved them.
When you deployed in 2002, you deployed where?
So we went initially to Pakistan, right? We
Uh-huh.
were in Jacobabad, Pakistan, and they were running operations out of there. And then after about a month there, we set up our operations at Kandahar in
Oh.
Afghanistan.
Mhm.
And we operated between Kandahar, and we also operated at K2 in Uzbekistan. But really, that was just kind of where we would rotate out for a few weeks, train, rest up. We had a mission. We sat alert there, but it was a pretty long ride in Afghanistan from Uzbekistan. So, and over some pretty inhospitable terrain. So, uh, I, there was only 1 or 2 missions we flew out of there, but most of the time we flew out of Kandahar. But so we would swap between Kandahar and Uzbekistan K2, um, and then eventually as the war matured, I was in Afghanistan at the beginning. I did 2 tours in the beginning, and then the rest of mine were to Iraq. But as it
2009.
matured, guys would go to Bog, and things ended up at Bagram and Camp Leatherneck and things like that. I wasn't there when any of those things were going on. My unit was, but I was just rotating. I was just
Right.
on different rotations. I did Iraq. Initially, we went to Bayap and then eventually ended up at Balad. And I think I did 4 rotations to Balad.
Yeah.
I used to call it my summer home because my friends would go to the Hamptons for the summer. I'd be like, I'm going to my summer cabin in Iraq.
Well, let's talk about that because you were at Iraq 2009.
That was my last deployment.
What
Was
was the living
2009.
conditions like for you in 2002?
Okay, so when we first got up in Pakistan, it was fine. We were in tents, nothing bad. When we took over Kandahar, it was pretty austere. It was kind of funny because we were, it was old school. We're burning our own crap, and it was pretty austere initially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Living like the army, and except our tents were a little nicer. What was interesting, it was there was a bunch of ex-army guys and me, and we were the only guys who knew field sanitation, right? None of the enlisted guys knew that, right? Because they don't teach that in the Air Force, right?
No.
How
Yeah.
to, yeah. And so
Yeah. Crap burners.
for like the first couple of weeks, you had all these captains and lieutenants burning shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and it was, we'd be burning, and there's airman so and so walking by looking at us snickering, and we're standing there. So we're just like, finally we're like, we got to give a class because this isn't hard. So
Right.
we finally gave a class to the maintenance guys and said, this is how you burn crap. You
Right.
put the JP8 on it, you light it on fire, you stir it till it disappears. That's how you do it. Guess what? Starting tomorrow, you guys are doing it. And
Yes.
yeah, but like for the first couple of weeks, you literally all the officers were doing it. And till finally, because none of us really cared. We just, all right. But then finally, somebody's like, after we got tired of watching, E1s and E2s walk by and laugh at us, we're like, you know what? We're going to give these guys a class and they're going to do it, and
Yes.
then we did. We went to our boss and we're like, hey, sir, we're gonna give these guys a class because we're not doing this. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, maybe you should. I was waiting for you guys to come up with that idea. He goes, but I wasn't gonna say anything if you guys weren't. So for about 2, 3 weeks, the officers were doing it, and then we turned it over. But it was pretty austere. But what I found in the military is, and I think it's ubiquitous to any unit, there's always a guy who's like can build a house, right? So as long as we had the materials, you know how they say always improve your fighting position.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Well, we would
Yeah.
always, so we had porches. So we went from living in these tents to tents with porches, with doors, would use the water bottle to make the door slam, and just, and we ordered toilet seats and built a really nice, luxurious, shitter, instead
Mm-hmm.
of, so we had toilet seats on the wood, and just, we built toilet paper holders. Just, you
Well,
know, there's always guys who can build stuff. So initially it was austere, and then by the end of the deployment, it was pretty good. And then as things matured, same with Iraq, eventually we lived in the Connex air
mhm.
conditioned little things. I deployed to the same hooch 4 times. So that's why I called it my summer house, and I lived pretty good. I mean, I used to fly around. We used to fly around and drop stuff off to all the guys in the bobs and fighting positions in the hills and stuff. And I mean, being a pilot's not bad. At least you go out and scare yourself, but you can come back and you're not living on the side of a hill for a year.
Right. And two things I want to mention is you do have those guys that can build something, make things nicer, but there was always that guy that could just find something and he knew
That
how to
was
get.
well, that was me.
That
That
was
was like,
you?
yeah, that was me. We had all these cool things we would trade, and uh my boss I was very lucky. I had some really good leaders who would look the other way when we needed to get stuff done. You know, I've
Uh-huh.
I
Go
back in the
ahead.
beginning, we had our black fleece, our coats,
Hmm?
and my boss, who was the lieutenant colonel, he would leave his hat laying around. So I would get like 2 big PJs, and I would get his hat, and I go to supply, And instead of being a captain, I'd be a lieutenant colonel. I'd be like, my name's Lieutenant Colonel, blah, blah, blah. And I have these two big PJs just standing there mean mugging some kid in the supply thing. And I'd be like, I need this, 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 and this. He goes, well, so you're gonna have to sign for it. I'm like, yeah, no problem. I'd scribble some name. We'd
Hmm.
walk out with it. Or we had these really cool switchblades, these Gerber switchblades. We just had a lot of them. So we just traded them with guys. And it's like that scene from The Godfather. We're not communists after all. Everybody's into, the capitalist system. So you could always find some guy who's like, you got this, I got this. Can we
Yes.
work something out? And it's funny. All the cliches from the war movies you watch,
Catch
well, it,
22.
well, Catch 22, after I love that more after I went to war, right? But all these cliches from these movies and shows, they're really true. There's a guy, there's all these characters, there's a guy who's really that way when you're out there. There's a guy you go to, like when I was stationed in the Philippines,
Hmm.
you had the Filipino mafia, the Filipino sailors, um, they ran stuff. And if you wanted stuff done, you got to know the Filipino chief, or you got to know the Filipino petty officer first class, and you stayed on good terms with them. And if they liked you, things went your way. And if they didn't, things could get incredibly difficult and slow, and I
Uh-huh.
was a pretty easygoing guy, and I got along with those guys, and I was always willing to look, when one of my guys would get like we had a guy, he ran a cockfighting ring,
Uh-huh.
and it was, yeah, obviously that's illegal,
Hmm.
but when it all came to light, I kind of covered for him and, minimized the damage and stuff. So the guy took care of me. I mean, back in those days, your leave papers were in triplicate. It's not online. You had the three leave papers, right? And the
Hmm.
one copy that went, through channels up to headquarters, right? That how you took leave off your account. Well, I'm sure somebody's going to get mad at this 20 something years later, but for $20, your leave papers could disappear. So I left the Philippines with 90 days of leave, and I came home on leave every year I was there. I mean, so,
Yeah.
but I mean, so yeah, there's always a guy, you can always get stuff done, but there's always a guy trying, there's always guys trying to make your life miserable too. There's always guys
Hmm.
bothering my guys about their uniforms, or I was, we were a combat unit, and I really bristled against the chicken shit, going back to an old term.
Hmm.
And so I didn't like these NCOs bugging my guys, because my guys would come back from the chow hall and tell me how they got harassed, or, my enlisted air crew, or the maintenance guys who were working their ass off on the flight line. And I would go find these people, and I would be like, listen, because at one point, my last three deployments, I was a passed over major. So I knew I wasn't going to make lieutenant colonel, So as far as I was concerned, I was bulletproof. There was like, what can you do to me? Send me to Iraq and try to kill me? I mean, so I really used that for what I thought was good. I took
Hmm.
care of my people. I was very, I would really get in people's faces who harassed my guys, and I took that serious because there was too many people with time on their hands to harass people. And I had, me personally, the chow hall I thought was kind of a sacred place. You didn't bug people in the chow hall. That's where people get 40 minutes to relax and laugh and goof around with their
I can't
buddies.
agree more.
And so I was, but there were guys who just lurk around. Hey, your mustache is too long, or this. And I would just, if it was one of my guys, I'd usually find him and I'd say, listen, if you see a guy with a rescue pass, you can't talk to him. And they would be, what do you mean, sir? I'm like, you can't talk to them. They're off limits to you. And they would be like, well, I represent the, I'm like, I don't care. Just, here's my name tag. Take it to whoever you want, but leave my guys alone, or I'm going to come see you every time,
Mhm.
stuff like that. My bosses love me because they would get complaints about me, and they'd be like, well, he's passed over. What do you want me to do? I can't send him home. I need every pilot. So they kind of had to get out of jail free card. So they would, whenever there's something they needed to get done, and they didn't, they knew that, they would send me to do it because and I love that stuff. I did. you are really at war, and if you can make
Mhm.
life a little easier for yourselves and your people, you should, but
Mhm.
there was just I got accused once of using the war for my own personal entertainment. And I was like, I don't know if I can say that's not true. Like we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of laughs. And, I lost a lot of friends and I've lost a lot more since, unfortunately. But, when I look back on the memories now, we laughed a lot. Honestly, going to war is pretty absurd. It really is an absurd sort of thing. And you got to laugh at it,
Mhm.
and uh, the military is a
Right.
giant bureaucracy, and it's just trying to combine the two, and it was just absurd. So you just made fun of things most of the time, and you're with a great bunch of guys, and they're really your surrogate family, for lack of a better term, and I look back on it, we just laughed at everything,
You
at everything.
it.
We had this sort of giant. There was something on TV about it recently. There was a sort of this giant yard, like junkyard of all the vehicles that had been blown up or
Mhm.
destroyed. This is where they brought them.
Mhm.
So you could go there and grab parts. It was like kind of, and our mechanics built like go-karts out of like salvaged parts, and they had like go-kart races or the inevitable, scorpion versus camel spider, or
Right.
all these, things you do to entertain yourself. And uh, you know, you got all these steely-eyed combat veterans jumping around when they see a camel spider on the couch, like diving over each other to get out of the way. You know,
Did they
um,
bite?
they don't bite. But the thing is they try to stay out of the sun, so they would chase your shadow. They're not aggressive camel spiders, actually, but they're really scary looking, right? And sometimes, like they would be in our buildings, or because our buildings were just built out of plywood and stuff,
Mhm.
so many times we'd be sitting on a couch and you're sitting there, and a guy look, and there's one crawling and six guys dive off the couch, and just would make me laugh. I'm like, these are guys yesterday in the middle of this craziness where we could have easily died talking on the radio, sounding calm as a cucumber. Now they're just it's just things like that. Or you know guys played video games and they would play, it was all connected, right? And they played these Call of Duty versus zombie games all
Oh,
night long, all
yes.
night long. And I'm like, you're going to get PTSD from this, more than the combat missions. Just all these things are just these bits and pieces of just funny stuff that,
Mhm.
uh, I just thought was hysterical,
It
and
is hysterical.
I wish I wish I kept a diary, or I wish I interviewed some people about what they thought about things,
Mhm.
just how much chow we had. Like, just the Air Force chow hall was ridiculous, just ridiculous. And
Yes.
and these people working there were from like Bangladesh, and I'm like, I wonder what these people think. These people come from a village where if they got a bowl of rice a day, they're lucky. And they're, here you got giant Americans just coming from the gym. Can I have 7 chicken breasts and these just
Yes.
corn-fed weightlifting? It just stuff like that. It just every day was you couldn't make the stuff up. You just
No.
couldn't make the stuff up.
I look at this podcast as sort of like a diary capturing, I guess, memories, and you're sharing some good ones. I want to ask you about some of the altitude challenges. Were there any challenges with the helicopter's
Sure.
performance?
Afghanistan's probably the most challenging place for helicopters to operate, in my
Uh-huh.
opinion. Yeah, it's probably some other, maybe the Himalayas. But I mean, as far as
Yeah.
it's very dusty, a lot of things we did at a high altitude, so you were power limited sometimes, visibility limit. It's very challenging. I mean, a lot of times the conditions were scarier than dealing with the enemy,
Mm.
because just weather change like that. Just a lot of
Yeah.
challenges, and altitude was an issue. I mean, I had to dump gas on our own troops. We're going in to get some guys, and we just were power limited, and they were in the middle of a fight. We actually were already up at like 8 or 9,000 feet, so we dumped gas. Hopefully it dissipated, but
Yeah.
I mean, we had to, we're only about 500-600 feet above the ground, but we were pretty
Mhm.
high, and we had to dump gas so we could get in the LZ to get the wounded guy because it definitely the very talcum powder fine dust really brutal, and it was caused a lot of problems, a lot of mishaps
Yeah.
because of the environment. We went through windshields fairly quickly because of the the abrasiveness of the
Oh yeah.
environment. It was tough on the blades, rotor blades,
Yes.
engines, control surfaces, any of the plexiglass. I mean, it definitely was a maintenance challenge and
Mhm.
an operational challenge to operate in that environment for sure.
And you talk about the mission with the Pavehawks, rescuing people and the satisfaction that you get from that, so others may live. Um, and I want to talk about what are you doing now?
So now, since I retired, I
Uh-huh.
fly air ambulance helicopters. I've been doing that pretty much on and off since I retired. I do some I do some safety stuff for the Air Force. I'm a subcontractor, so I do some safety analysis
Hmm.
specifically for the H-60G and the H-60W in
Okay.
the Air Force. But primarily, I'm an air ambulance helicopter pilot. Been doing that uh, pretty much since I retired, as I said, on and off.
And when was that?
I retired in 2011, January of 2011.
What I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Go
What
ahead.
was the airframes that you fly for
Oh
air
God.
rescue now?
So I've flown the Bell 222, which is the Airwolf helicopter.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's a handsome helicopter.
the I've currently fly and have flown the Bell 407, various models. I'm currently flying the GXI. I've flown the A Star, B3s, B3Es, EC 130, T2, and AW 119.
So
Well,
are
now,
any of these Airbus models
yeah,
or
yeah, the A Star and the EC 130 are Airbus aircraft.
and the AW?
That's a Leonardo now. It was a
Oh,
Gusla Westland. Now it's Leonardo
it's a AW what?
119, or it's a Leonardo 119 now.
Have you seen the Air Force's Gray Wolf?
Yeah,
Is
that's
it
a
like that?
Leonardo. No, it's so single engine, looks more like a Bell 407,
Okay.
little bigger version of it.
You've got quite a repertoire of airframes under your belt there,
Yeah,
huh?
I've flown, well, obviously, uh, Jet Ranger,
Yeah.
uh, CH53. I've flown the H3. I've got 1 hour in the 46, uh, 53, H60, Huey, and then we get into the civilian, again, Bell 407,
Uh-huh.
uh, Airbus
Range.
125, which is the A Star,
Yeah.
Airbus 130, which is uh, the big one with the fenestron, for it's designed for tours, but EMS uses it as well.
Mhm.
A couple of different models of the Bell 407, the 119, and then the Bell 222, that was actually a lot of fun. That was a great aircraft.
Are any of them NOTARs?
No, no, I've never flown any of the Notars. I've flown the fenestron, which
Oh.
is that tail rotor that's encased,
Hmm.
looks like a fan.
Yeah.
On the fenestron, but no Notar. From what I hear, the Notar is no bargain. It's pretty underpowered
Oh, really?
in that way. So
I'm
it's
not sure what
nothing.
the motivation was even to have that
Just to not
created.
have a tail rotor to be able to, with the ducted thing, but it's not powerful enough. It's just not as good as a beefy
You don't kind of get that
manly tail
authority that you,
rotor. Yeah, it's
yeah.
just not gonna have as much authority.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite a bit.
The A Star has the best tail rotor authority, in my
Does
opinion.
it?
Yeah,
Why do you
yeah.
think that is?
It's got a beefy, manly tail rotor, and it's nice and windy. You're not going to run out of tail rotor authority. Where in the Bell product, if you get a weird crosswind or
Uh-huh.
quartering, you could run out of tail rotor authority. So I just think, uh, you know, that's just my opinion that the A-Star's a little better in the
I
light
would,
helicopter category because of that.
yeah, I'd put a lot of stock in your authority, what your opinions are. Where do you reside and where do you work?
So I live in Las Vegas. I
Okay.
work in Fort Mojave, Arizona, which is right across the river from Laughlin, Nevada, about out 120 miles or so south of Vegas
Uh-huh.
along the Colorado River. Um, I've worked all over though. I've worked in Vegas itself. I've worked in Missouri. I've worked as far east as Missouri and commuted to Missouri every 2 weeks. I've worked in New Mexico. I've worked all over Arizona, Nevada, pretty much all over the Southwest
Have you
doing
flown
it.
into the Grand Canyon?
I have.
What
Well, I
is
was a
that
tour
like?
pilot for a little while. I did tours in between EMS jobs, but we go into the Wallapai uh, tribe thing all the time. Well, it's
Oh,
pretty
really?
chat where they're located. Not the Wallapai. I'm sorry. The I'll think of it in a minute.
Okay.
It is the Wallapai, but they're they're down at the bottom of the canyon, and at night it's actually pretty challenging, especially on a dark night.
Wow, I bet. And
The
you're
only
not
way
on
they get
NVGs,
we're on
are you?
MVGs.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's challenging.
Yeah. Wow.
MVGs are great, but they're not the be all end all.
Okay.
They make they make what would have been impossible possible, but it doesn't make it any less scary or hard.
I bet, especially for your beacons flashing on a canyon wall or
Well,
something
we
and
don't.
getting
Yeah, I
them.
mean, we have infrared lighting. We have
Uh,
all that, so you can adjust for that.
okay.
But yeah, it's flying into the canyon's a challenge. It's fun. Yeah, I'm more familiar with flying around the Grand Canyon than I would ever want to be.
Oh,
It
I
has
understand.
lost any novelty for me at
Okay.
all.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. What, when you flew tours, did you go to the rim and then nose over and go down? I've
Uh,
seen that, but I don't know what that's
I
about.
didn't do that
Okay.
because the it's a stupid thing to do. Guys did it for tips and it's fun, but at that stage of my career,
Uh,
I was like, I'm not gonna kill myself or anybody else doing something stupid.
for a
That
tip.
I Yeah, I mean, listen,
Yeah.
tours is tours is where most of the civilian trained guys um build their turbine time so they can move on to the next job like EMS or
Hmm.
utility or something like that.
Hmm.
Not as many military guys do it. I didn't I didn't like it. I thought it was the most boring, non-challenging flying you could do.
Okay.
And by the third or fourth flight of the day with some really unfriendly Russians or uh, just let's just say not well-behaved tourists, so I don't
Okay.
attack any nationality in particular.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, it could get old. It could get old.
I
And
see.
and I'm not a fan. It's a great way for guys to build experience and things like
Yeah.
that. I did it simply to pay bills in between jobs, and
Hmm.
I didn't enjoy it very much. And like I said, that the novelty of the Grand Canyon, I fly over the Grand Canyon all the time to and from, and I'm like, this is pretty. Everybody's like, oh, it's amazing. Take some pictures. I'm like, whatever. Make crews like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. I'm like, whatever. I've
Uh-huh.
seen this 100 times. Could
Yes, you have.
tell you how old the rock is and all that stuff. So, you know, um, could review the tour speech if I had to. So,
Oh gosh. Okay.
but
Yeah.
it's good flying. But yeah, I've been very lucky, and it's not lost on me as I come in the fourth quarter of my career in life that I was very, very lucky. I've got to do a lot of cool things.
Yeah.
There's definitely
Yes, you.
some things in flying I'd like to still do,
Hmm.
but if I stop flying tomorrow, I've been very, very lucky. So
What what does tomorrow look like for Yogi?
I'd like to fly for a few more years. I still enjoy it. I still get that same sort of childlike excitement walking out to a helicopter early in the morning
Uh-huh.
when the sun's coming out. I
Uh-huh.
love the start of the engine and the turbine kicking off and all. I love all that. so that spend as much time as I can with my kids and grandkids,
Yeah.
and I do some acting. So if
Do
I
you?
could, if I've had some successes in that regard. If I could ever get to the point where I could make a living as an actor, maybe I'd put flying on the back burner. I don't know, but we're not even close, so it's not even something to think about yet.
Okay.
Dabbling on putting together the outlines for a novel I've had in the back of my head for a while. Hopefully, I'll have a first draft done in the next year.
I would
Uh,
like to know whenever
well,
something's
so
published from
it's
you.
World War II novel. That's
Yeah.
I'm a World War II geek,
Are
so it's
you?
a World War II based thing.
Uh-huh.
I'm a
The
big
what
I'm a
the
history major, and I've always been a World War II buff.
the aviation side of it, World War II,
Yeah,
is
it's
that?
aviation mixed in with a little OSS stuff.
Oh, okay. Pacific, Europe.
Europe, Europe,
Ah,
uh,
there's
Europe. It's
will there be a Lysander in that novel?
no, but similar, but
Uh-huh.
carpetbagger ops are going to be in it.
Oh, nice.
If you yeah, so if you're familiar with the carpetbagger ops are going to be in it.
Wasn't it
Um,
crazy?
a little bit of historical fiction. Let me
Okay.
put it that way. It's a what if this happened instead of that happened type thing.
Well, you know how
You
to
know,
get a hold of me, and when it
yeah.
happens, I want to know,
Oh well, yeah. Well,
and I'd love to
hopefully
have it.
if I'm successful, you'll know.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, if you're a reader, you'll know. But
I'm a
so
reader.
I'm working on that, putting the outlines together, doing a lot of the initial research,
Mhm.
and then I'm hoping my biggest problem is I work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and I've got to start using my downtime a little better, and get a little more disciplined about the actual writing. Actually, but like I said, I want to hopefully have a first draft by the end of next summer. And
Mhm.
then, if at that point I'll shop it around and see if anybody's interested.
Awesome. I think
But that's it, just that kind of stuff. And, I'll fly as long as my health holds out. I've been very blessed. I had some cancer, but we were able to deal with that.
sorry to hear that.
And, we were able to get through that. I'm fine now,
Mhm.
but as long as my health holds out, like I said, I still enjoy flying, and I don't have to get a real job. No one wants a real
When
job where you have to go to work every day.
yeah, when you hear an airplane, do you still look up for a
Absolutely.
helicopter?
Absolutely.
Do you attend the air show at Las Vegas, Nellis Air Force Base?
I I don't as much anymore because I don't it's more of a pain in the ass. Like before, I would just roll up to my squadron and
Right.
park at the squadron and go in through the squadron, and every now and then I can do it. I'll go and I'll be like, "Hey, I used to be in the squadron. Will you guys let me sneak through here?" And da da da. But some guys don't, like I don't know, sir. Other guys are cool about it. So
Mhm.
uh I go once in a while, but not as much,
Yeah.
but uh and honestly when I go, like, I'm into the warbirds. Like I go to see the Spitfire and the Mustang and the Corsair. I mean, I've seen the Thunderbird and the Blue Angels so many
Yeah.
times, and I love them,
Oh yeah.
but I've seen it. It's been there, done that. It's like so I don't go, oh, I can't wait. I'm like, what I mean, I've and my squadron at Nellis, they would fly over us practicing the Thunderbirds, right? So you would be sitting there walking out to your car, and here comes an F-16 at 100 feet, and now all the car alarms in the parking lot are going off. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
I
That's
do.
just a practice day. So, you got used to seeing that stuff. The same in the Navy, so you just get used to that stuff.
Mhm.
So for me, air shows are, I'm a big warbird guy. I love World War II aircraft and stuff. So I like that stuff. But definitely, like, if I'm inside and I hear a helicopter, I go outside to look at it,
Mhm.
still to see, enjoying it, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah. What's your favorite warbird?
I'm a, well, I have a P-51 tattooed on my arm right here. I don't know if you can see it,
Ah, you're a slut. Look at that.
but P-51, Spitfire.
Yeah.
I like B-20. I like the PBJs, and I like
Oh,
the plexiglass and put machine guns and cannons in the nose. And all they do is go and they strafe like Rabaul and New Guinea, and they used to drop those parachute bombs. And I mean that was cool. I'm like, that was cool.
I
You
forget the
know,
colonel's name of that squadron, but not McKinney, but yeah, that was
well, Kinney was in charge of the fifth. Uh, was it the 15th Air Force? I'm not sure which Air Force it was. Kinney was the guy in charge of that particular Air Force in the Pacific, but I know the guy you're talking about. There's a guy, Happy something. I read his book. His family was interned in the Philippines while he was fighting the war, actually. And he was the guy who kind of invented putting the cannon and the machine guns in the nose of those
because that was a
B-25s.
field shit. It wasn't done at North American
No, no,
Aviation.
that
That
was,
was
yep,
done out in the field, right?
yep, yep,
That's
yep, yep. But
awesome.
that's so I like the weird airplanes.
Yeah.
I like reading about the carpetbagger missions,
Uh-huh.
the first special operations, getting people in and out of Europe. The
Hmm.
Brits were really good at it in the Lysanders, but I
Oh
like
yeah.
the Americans did some cool stuff too.
Hmm.
When I was first in the Marine Corps, what I wanted to fly was the OV-10. That was the aircraft I wanted to fly more than anything, and I'd
Yeah.
still love to fly one. So I like all the kind of offbeat stuff, and my 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 story is going to be a little bit about that, but it's going to involve a fairly famous person who I'm just going to create a situation that didn't happen in real life, and
That
we'll
sounds
see what
cool.
happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
see what happens.
Well, I look forward to it. I do.
Well, hopefully I'll get it done.
Yeah, you will.
Right now it's just a lot of this. Hopefully I'll
Uh,
actually sit down and get it done.
it is. You don't find time. You have to make time, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's about this. You know what's fun? I don't miss workouts, so I have to kind of mentally discipline myself that way about writing. Like I think I'm
Hmm.
going to set like 5 pages a day or some achievable goal, and then start that way, and then kind of move forward from there.
Good man. That's good planning. Well, we're coming up on the hour mark here,
Well,
Yogi.
listen, Dutch, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I look forward to seeing some more of your stuff again.
Mhm.
Like I said, I'm aviation.
Aviation geek. I totally relate. Yeah, we could yak all the time, but I was almost going to ask you the startup sequence of a helicopter. I know a little bit of airplane, but
It's not anything different. It's you. I
more
mean,
things are up here or something. I don't know.
it depends on the aircraft.
Yeah.
Really is. It's you. All you're doing is you're turning on a battery, a fuel pump, introducing fuel, hitting the starter. Same thing as an aircraft engine,
Okay.
just a little different machinations. But a turbine engine's a turbine engine,
Hmm.
and you're pumping fuel into the turbine, sucking in air, lighting it off, and then instead of that engine producing the thrust,
Hmm.
right, it produces energy connected through the gears to turn the rotors, and then the rotors produce your thrust and lift. The engine is providing the power, it's not
Okay.
providing the thrust. The thrust is provided by
I did not know that.
the rotors, the pitch of the rotors, and the
Hmm.
angle of the rotors.
There you are. I'm glad I asked.
And that's oversimplified because I'm not an engineer. I keep it in very simple terms. There's
Yep.
people out there who can explain it to you in great detail and give you a better understanding of it. I'm just not that person.
Well, I'm glad you because I'm a guy that still eats crayons. So
Yeah,
I did.
I get it. I'm a knuckle dragger. All right, Dutch. Thank you so much for having me, man. I've really enjoyed talking with you very much.